Yes, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. How are you doing today? I hope my sound is clear. It's just what I'm trying to... Yes. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. How are you doing today? I hope my sound is clear. Just what I'm trying to... Yes, if my sound is fine, then that's good. You can just let me know, and we can talk about different issues that are happening in the country. I have a lot to catch up with. So this is I think this is the what is this? This is March. Uganda, we are still trying to fight for our victory, to have it back from the from the from the shackles of Museveni and his cocoon of lunatics that took our power. Now, Bobi Wine has been up to a lot of things as we speak, and there's a controversy that happened over the week where he posted about a certain gentleman known as Juan Guaido. I think I'll have a word about that, because most people, you see, I always tell people that I always never understand, unless if you're coming from a particular country, like the people of Africa cannot understand, could not have understood the plight of Ugandans, unless if at all we, the Ugandan people who have lived these experiences, did come out to explain to the world what is happening in our country. Because dictators and autocrats have learned a system where they present a particular image to the international audience and portray a different image to the to the people that they oppress. That's the, you know, that famous quote by Malcolm X. It's like the media today turns the oppressed into the oppressors, and then they turn the oppressors into the oppressed. So bad leadership, whenever it happens in a state or in a society, the oppressors always look for scapegoats. They will come up with reasons that, oh, it is the foreigners, oh, it is the Americans, oh, it is this and this and that. This is a common trend in African countries. You'll find that Mugabe is a very big hero in Africa, and people look up to Mugabe. But the people that look up to Mugabe, they never mention the Gukurahundi or Gukurahundi massacre, whereby the people of Matebele land were literally massacred under Mugabe's regime. So, as Africans, how do you reconcile that? How do you reconcile Mugabe's Pan-Africanism with massacres? So some people might argue that, no, we can overlook the fact that Mugabe massacred his own people, and let us look at the fact that Mugabe stood up against the whites. And always my question would be, of what importance would it be for us to stand up against the whites, but then end up killing our own people, not because they are standing up against the whites, but because our own people have actually disagreed in how we run and how we rule a particular nation state. Yes. You'll find people saying that Gaddafi is a hero. I understand. Gaddafi was a very good African hero. But this is just for people who have not taken time to understand the plight of the Libyan people. These are people who have not taken time to read about Gaddafi's expansionist policies in the Chad, in the people of Chad, the people of Chad, his invasion of Sudan, and all these other countries. So as Pan-Africanist, how do you reconcile that particular element? Well, we see that Gaddafi is, on the other one hand, is a very good Pan-Africanist, a person who has helped to the continent, he has contributed money, but he's also a person who has financed different rebel activities. He's a person who has invaded different countries, and also is a person who has trumped up against his own people. So how do you reconcile that? But on the other hand, he's the same person who has stood up against the British and the Americans. You get the point, right? So thank God for social media, thank God for Facebook, thank God for all these platforms, that we are now able to tell the world what is happening in Uganda without sugarcoating anything. It is in broad daylight that we have a person who stole an election, who beat up his own people, who killed his own people. But if that same person comes out and starts speaking about, oh, Africa, Africa, Africa should be one, Africa this, Africa that, foreigners this, foreigners that, it is unbelievable. People cannot believe him. People cannot absolutely believe him. Have you ever sat down and asked yourself, some people say that Amin was the worst president that we ever had in Uganda. But it is funny that people, you see, when I sit down and look at different dictators that we have had, the likes of Masias Ngema, the likes of Mobutu, the likes of Bokassa, Mugabe, Gaddafi. Have you ever wondered why Amin is always so much in the press? Like, why everyone knows a lot about Amin, but no one knows about Ngema? Actually, Ngema killed his own family. The reason is this. The way Amin treated the white people and the British, it created a lot of attention on himself. And they would say that, okay, Amin killed 500,000 people, isn't it? That is what he's renowned for. But Amin left in 1979. How come that we have over 1 million people or 2 million people that died after Amin left? And it was not as a result of Amin's departure. No. This was fighting between people like Obote and Museveni that created more deaths in the nation. Ever wondered why Amin was never indicted for war crimes? Ever wondered why Amin was never... I know we joined the Rome Statute somewhere in 2002 or 2003, but nothing was ever brought up against Amin. Because if you charge Amin, then you're going to charge Obote, you're going to charge Museveni, like it or not. Because Museveni created a war in Luwero that killed over... We know the skulls of Luwero. If you go to Uganda and ask about the skulls of Luwero, I've looked at for Amini's skulls since the 70s, never seen any Amini's skulls. But we know the skulls of Museveni, they are in Luwero, where they are being piled up to show people what happened when these two forces were fighting, of Museveni as well as Obote. So why is it that the press in the West would like to paint a picture about Uganda looking through Amini's lenses And they do not look into Museveni's own crimes. Because Museveni has been a puppet. Because Museveni has been working in their interest. So you have to protect your interests while you're protecting Museveni. Hide all his crimes, strip them under the rug. All the people he killed, the people he's still killing and arresting. So that is what is happening. But all of a sudden they will say, oh, Amin. No, it is because of the way Amin actually really actually stood up against the Americans as well as the British. That's why Amin is hated. And then they'll find someone to drive the narrative, who is Museveni, and exaggerate and say, okay, 500,000 people died during Amin's regime. Now, if you're talking about 500,000, I'm not saying that people didn't die. Of course, people were killed during Amin's regime. And when Amin left, we also got something that is much worse, which is Museveni. 35 years. He can comfortably come on TV and say that, okay, I have your people, I kidnapped them. Oh, yeah, that one we killed him. But I will give you a report about that one that we killed. He comes on TV and tells us the people he has killed, the people he has arrested, the people that he has in his custody, everything. But when he mentions something that says, oh, Pan-African, people are like, yeah, ha, ha, ha. Our Museveni, the Pan-Africanist. There is absolutely nothing like Pan-Africanism. I'm one of those people that do not believe in Pan-Africanism until Africa can sort out the problem of leadership, until Africa can sort out the problem of people who overstay in power. The reason as to why the Western nations, the reasons as to why countries like the Western countries or the British and the Americans, why they are where they are and we are not there yet, it is one simple reason. I've told people today, it is one simple reason, nothing else. It is the ability to change power from one person to another. It is the ability to switch power from one political party to another. That's it. That is it. There is nothing else. When we figure that out as Africans, if we can figure that out as a continent, we shall be able to overcome all the problems that we have. That's it. That is it. Nothing more that these people are doing that is magical. I'm not the person of a school of thought who will come here, start saying Americans this, Americans that, British this, British that, or these ones this, these ones that, or these ones. No, I'm not in that kind of thing. My kind of understanding issues is to look at, okay, what are these people what are they doing that is different, that creates stability in their states that we do not have in Uganda? If you can change leadership, it creates accountability in a state. But if you have leaders that can overstay for like 70 years or 30, it means there will be no accountability. Even if you have a leader as good as as good as Gaddafi, or a leader as good as that gentleman in Zimbabwe, what do you call him, the so-called Mugabe? He knows that he will rule for 30 years, and no, he doesn't have to be accountable to anyone. Look at this, ladies and gentlemen. In 1945, the Japanese were defeated by the Americans, as well as the Italians. All these countries were defeated. Japan was bombed twice. I was talking to some people today in my Luganda program. Japan was bombed twice with a nuclear bomb in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. For sure, Japan would not have recovered. It would absolutely not have recovered. But how come Japan recovered and Uganda that was not bombed, or Zimbabwe that was not bombed with nuclear, we are still struggling? How did Japanese manage to pull out of that? Now, Japanese, they have, their own way of playing. Or they have prime ministers who even commit suicide just because of corruption. If they are being implicated in cases, the Japanese, they just go and commit what do you call that thing where they go and slice their berries? They commit suicide. They slice their berries. The yakuzas. They go and slice their berries because of shame of being indicted in corruptions. In South Korea, it is the same thing. They had a war, the Korean War. We have not gone through the worst as Africa. No. In terms of where our countries or where the origins of the problems of Africa come from, it is leadership, period. It is absolutely leadership. Even if we had a Lumumba in every country in Africa, but if that Lumumba overstayed in power, trust me, Africa would still fail. Now, you would wish to have war, or you would wish to be bombed with a nuclear bomb, and the sacrifice to have leadership that can change in every 5 years or 10 years, than having a sort of stable-ish kind of environment, whereby you have leaders that stay in power for like 60 or 70 years, because those have proved to be very disastrous. That model has proved to be very disastrous, very bad. Look here, guys. The Japanese are now even giving aid to Uganda through JICA, Japanese International Cooperation Agency. They are building, I was studying in Makerere, a faculty called JICA. We have a building called JICA. That is opposite the university library. These are people who are bombed with 2 nuclear bombs. Now let me ask you one question. If Uganda was bombed twice, would we really recover when we have people like the Musevenis? We cannot recover. You get it? Because you will have to suffer, number one, the bombing. Afterwards, you have to suffer then the wrath of the dictators. That's what happens. The Koreans, the same. The Northern Korea, the South Koreans and the Northern Korea, the Koreans. Look at South Korea. These were countries in, look at Vietnam. Oh, these countries, the Asian countries, whatever, the Indonesias, how come these people managed to pull out? It is because they managed to change power. That is the recipe. Simple. It is simple. Because whenever you change power, you bring up new people who have different ideas of different ways of looking at things. These people will be able to renegotiate deals. Because this is what these imperialists do not want. They want to live with someone for 40 years that they know, okay, we have our Mugabe in Zimbabwe, we have our Museveni in Uganda, we have our so-and-so here, and it is the same policy all over. It is the same policy for 60 years, of 30 years. And Mugabe is, whatever, Museveni will give the baton to the son. It is the same thing. That is why you see that the Francophone African countries are struggling. Because France has them in their wrist, and France is making sure that these people, they stay in power for as long as they want them to stay in power. The Bongos, Idris Deby, all of these people, they're under their grip because they don't want to change. Because if they change, then they have to renegotiate. And if you renegotiate, it is in the interest of the Africans, or it is in the interest of the Ugandan people. You get the point? So change. Whenever you change leadership, it brings about development, it brings about accountability, it brings about transparency. One other factor that people should also look into is that you should understand that, you see, we should understand our history. That the modern 54 states of Africa were crafted by the Western powers. We should all agree. Now, we can sit down here and lament and say, oh, these guys did this in the Berlin conference, so they put us all to... Yeah, we can. But you could ask your question that, was colonialism inevitable? It was not inevitable. I'm sorry, it was inevitable. Because it is in the nature of man, of human beings, to conquer, to do all these sorts of things. So colonialism was inevitable, right? Now, if we agree to that, and if we accept the boundaries, this is why I always talk with my Pan-African friends and say, okay, fine, that if we agree to the boundaries and say that these are the boundaries that were created for Zimbabwe, these are the boundaries that were created for Uganda, and we agree, right? So we need to understand that, okay, these people that created these boundaries, number one, they thought that they would carry on colonialism for like thousands of years. The people who sat in Berlin to create the 54 states today, the so-called scramble and partition of Africa, they thought that, okay, in 2,000 years, Africa will be still under our grip, colonialism, blah, blah, blah. So they never thought it would be that early. Okay? Then you had the world wars happening, and then it escalated everything, and then power was handed over to us. But the model on which these modern states were created, for them to survive, they had to have that so-called element of democracy, where power is being transferred from one person to another, where power is being shared, putting in regard or putting in reference to the complexities of a particular nation state or to the complexities of a particular country. There is no country in Africa that doesn't have a tribe. African societies, the notion or the idea that Europeans teach their people and tell them that Africa was a dark continent, Africa was not civilized, Africa did not have any sort of leadership, they were not doing trade, they were uncivilized, they had no form of government. That is wrong. I come from a tribe called Buganda, and I've always told people that Buganda, we had a type of government. And it is that type of government that was taken, and the way Uganda is being ruled today, the system of government that we have in terms of administration, was taken exactly from the Buganda model, where we had the king, we had the prime minister, we had the sub-county, we had the county, up to the village. All those were representatives to the king. The same, because, I mean, all that was there, and more other kingdoms in the continent. They had different ways of how they governed themselves. They had different ways on how they existed with other tribes. Now, if you create a state like Uganda, and for argument's sake, you say you have 62 tribes. You get it? You have 62 tribes. Now, if you go to, for example, if you go to Sweden, or if you go, to England, there is no problem of tribalism, but there is a problem of race. The same applies to America. There is no tribalism. If you go to America and talk about tribalism, tribalism is a completely different phenomenon. But they have a problem of race, whereby you have a problem between black and whites, right? Now, the same thing happens in South Africa. If you go to South Africa, there is a race problem, not a tribal problem. But also in South Africa, you have a xenophobic problem, right? Where people are being discriminated according to their color, people are being discriminated according to the countries they come from, leading to xenophobia. If you come to Uganda, we have a problem of tribe, whereby if Museveni comes from a particular tribe, he will use his own people from his own tribe and then subjugate or, tramp upon people who do not come from his tribe. That is what is happening. Right? So when that happens, the other tribes and, people who feel dissatisfied, they are definitely going to rise up. It is the same thing that is happening in Ethiopia. It is the same thing that is happening in Ethiopia. Wherever a crisis is, it is the same thing that is happening in Central African Republic. If it is not tribe, it is race. If it is not race, it is religion. That's why you see the the Balakas, anti-Balaka and anti-Seleka, they are killing each other in Ethiopia. But if you go to America, it is a problem of race. That, okay, we have the blacks and the whites. You come to England, it is the problem of race. It's not so much of a problem of religion. But in Africa, we have so many problems. We have a problem of race, we have a problem of tribes, we have a problem of religion, we have a problem of xenophobia. So how do you solve that? How do you solve all that? Does a change of leadership from one person to another, having different people taking up leaderships in one mode, does it solve it? Yes, it definitely solves it. Just imagine a group of people ruling a particular nation for over 40 years, and they have mistreated a particular group of people from a particular religion. Now, look here, guys. I'm a Muslim, right? And I know what is happening in Uganda. Under Museveni's rule, a gentleman was brought on TV yesterday. He was waterboarded by Museveni's guys. They waterboarded the man, literally. They waterboarded him, saying that he was part of the people who killed a prominent policeman, of which evidence is now surfacing that the prominent policeman that was murdered was a criminal himself, because he engaged in various activities where they were cutting deals. He was a bad cop. Now this gentleman was arrested and forced to confess through waterboarding because he was a Muslim. He was a good target. Right? And this is not the first time. We all know, for the people who come from Uganda, you know what it means to be Muslim. Now, if you're Muslim, and then you come from a particular tribe, man, for you the things are so worse for you, you should just run out of the country. That is it. That's what is happening. That is what is exactly happening. So, the point is this, that our brothers and sisters in the entire world should understand that whoever stands with the oppressed people, whether black or white, Christian or Catholic, Muslim or non-Muslim, whatever, the people of Uganda will stand with them at this juncture, because now it has become a fight for survival. You will either be kidnapped, or you will be killed, or they will create situations where you will be forced to kill yourself. You have lots of people in the country now, they are starving. Some are even burning themselves to death just because a policeman took their motorbike that they were using to earn a living. And the gentleman, the president, comes out comfortably and says, ha, I have them all. I arrested them all. All your friends, I have them. They are with me. There's nothing you can do. Oh, I killed that one. That is what it is. That is what it is. Now, I was listening to a podcast and some gentleman said that the West, the West and all these governments, they are saying that, oh, Museveni is a beacon of stability in the region, blah, 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 blah. You know, those cliches that they're always talking about. Now, the other guy told them, look here, you are saying that Museveni is the force of stability. But what you don't understand is he's sowing seeds of instability in the country as well as in the region. He's sowing the seeds of instability in the country as well as the region. And this is what people have failed to look at and understand. For him, Museveni, he thinks he's in a game, he's playing a game, whereas people are suffering and dying, which is really sad anyway. So, I always tell people that, especially when I'm talking about issues to deal with Pan-Africanism, that the concept of Pan-Africanism is being used as a scapegoat by people like Museveni. And now we have this issue of, because there are different schools of thought, there are different ideologies that people have. Some people say that socialism is good for Africa, capitalism is good for Africa, and so on and so forth, right? My friend, what Africa needs is not socialism. What Africa needs is not capitalism. What Africa needs is a change of power from one leader to another. It doesn't hurt if this time we have a leader of socialism. It doesn't hurt if the other time we have a leader of capitalism. Because the Pan-Africanist ideology is mostly based on the fact that Africa should adopt a socialist kind of ideology. But most of the people who were the purveyors of such socialism, most of them even abandoned the ideology. You get the point? I wouldn't like to live like, either socialism or communism, whatever, or capitalism. People like the Gaddafis. Gaddafi was a big capitalist. The only person that I can speak of who was quite socialist was Nkrumah, but Nkrumah, his socialism was a mixture of capitalism as well as a wee bit of socialism. So you cannot, that is a sort of utopic view where you think that Africa can be a socialist kind of, a completely pure socialist kind of environment. I do not believe in that sort of ideology. I don't believe Africa needs to be a socialist continent or a capitalistic continent or communist, but they have to strike a balance. We have to strike a balance. And also, because what is happening is, what is interesting is that this is what is socialism is when people come out. For example, our best example on socialism in Africa is Tanzania, the nearest neighbor to Uganda. The biggest experiment that failed, the Ujamaa policy in Tanzania under Julius Nyerere. He tried it, creating communes. Africa, all of a sudden, Tanzania became some sort of a Cambodia. People starved. People died in Tanzania with the Nyerere's Ujamaa policy. We have tried this. It failed. The idea that people should come out and start building roads without being paid. The idea that people should grow food communally and then start sharing that food amongst themselves. It does not work. Societies, or African society, is created in a sense that yes, government can help, but still people have to work. You just have to strike a wee bit of balance. You get it? So there is this idea that the idea of socialism, that people should grow food and then the government does this and that, and the government controls everything. The market forces, it controls everything, the prices and everything is controlled by the government. The government builds this, builds that. Yes, the elements, some of them are good, but there has to be, all that sort of thing. So, for me, my point, these are just my own views and understanding on how Ugandans can try, or how we can fight back to see that we really take Museveni out. Because let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, Museveni is not going to go if at all we do not have allies. And that is what Bobi Wine has managed to cultivate for every change-seeking Ugandan in the nation. That's what he has managed to do. You see, there is this idea that people think that, you see, you don't see guys coming out. Now, there's this issue that happened of, the issue that happened of Maduro and, you see, and what do you call that guy? Juan Guaido. So Juan Guaido comes, he he talks to Bobi Wine. Bobi Wine posts a conversation calling Juan Guaido president, and I saw some bit of a backlash from people. I asked myself, okay, what crime has Bobi Wine committed to speak to Juan Guaido and maybe to call him president? Number one. Number two, if at all Maduro was interested in helping Ugandan people, how come he hasn't reached out to Bobi Wine yet? How come he hasn't reached out to the people of Uganda yet? And what is interesting is Maduro and Museveni, they are partners, right? I, Fazil, I will view Maduro as my oppressor because he's standing with someone who is murdering my parents. Regardless whether Maduro is a socialist, regardless whether Maduro is being fought by the Western powers. The fact that Maduro is working with Museveni, that is where I draw the line. The rest we shall see later. The rest we can look at it later. Now, you see, those are the complexities in this sort of politics that we are facing today. Because we have our brothers and sisters in the struggle who believe in socialistic ideology. We have our brothers and sisters from other different parts of the continent, and I understand, who believe that Bobi Wine should not welcome some people or should not stand with some people. But then the rivals of those particular people are supporting Museveni. So where do you stand on that particular issue? So if at all Juan Guaido has spoken to Bobi Wine, right? Okay, that is bad because we say, okay, that Juan Guaido is the puppet of the Americans. But wait a minute. What if Maduro is working in Museveni, win gold deals, and Museveni is providing diplomatic passports to Maduro's men to escape and run out of the country in Venezuela? So does that make Museveni a saint? So if I told you are Ugandan, or if I told you are standing with the people of Uganda, so are you saying that we should stand with Museveni because he's supporting Maduro? Or are you saying that we should leave Bobi Wine because he spoke with Juan Guaido, who you claim is a US puppet? You get the point? So, for me, I laughed because most of the people do not understand the situation in Venezuela and what happened. Because Venezuela was a complete socialist state. Under the Chavista, this gentleman known as Hugo Chavez, who passed away, unfortunately. Now, we all understand that Venezuela is the country with the highest or with the biggest number of oil reserves in the world. There are 10 times more than oil reserves in Saudi Arabia. Meaning that Venezuela is the biggest country, it is the, maybe richest country, if you can say. But then we have a thing known as the resource curse. We have a thing known as the whereby a country being over-relying on a particular resource. In this case, we are talking about Venezuela, over-relying on oil, right? Of which they make a lot of money on oil. So this enabled Hugo Chavez, the late, to create a robust and successful socialist programs whereby he could even give out free oil to neighboring countries. And during those days, Venezuela was the biggest country in South America and the strongest, because it would give out subsidized oil to these particular nations. And Venezuela also managed to build houses for people. You know, all those socialist programs, free health care, free education. I mean, it was a very big revolution for Mr. Hugo Chavez. But then the problem comes, because they were over-reliant on oil. Then the oil prices dropped. Then all of a sudden they could no longer afford these programs that were subsidized. Then all of a sudden the people that they were paying for in terms of things like medical bills and all this kind of thing, the people had to pay something. You get the point? So because they relied so much on oil, and then when the prices slumped, it created this sort of economic depression, economic catastrophe in the country for over 10 years now. And then Hugo Chavez passes on. He hands over the baton to Nicolas Maduro, of which Nicolas Maduro was the hand-picked successor of this gentleman known as Hugo Chavez. So Maduro comes into power, and then the party continues to be unpopular because of the economic situation in the country. So Juan Guaido comes out. He comes into the National Assembly as the Speaker of the House. Maduro holds a fraudulent election. We should not sugarcoat that. Maduro held a fraudulent election where some of the people in the opposition were even refused to contest. Well, there's that element of similarity between Maduro and Museveni. He held an election that was fraudulent, whereby some people in the opposition were forced not to run. Now, the fact that this gentleman Guaido had come, he was the Speaker of the House, and there is somewhere in the Constitution of Venezuela that if at all anything happens and there's an impasse in the situation, the Speaker of the House can take over the leadership of the country. So Guaido used that opportunity, because he was in the opposition, of course, and then executed that rule in the constitution to take over power, because Maduro had held fraudulent elections. So that's how that's how the sort of confusion comes in terms of the presidency of Venezuela between Guaido as well as the gentleman known as Maduro. Then, of course, what happened there, we all know. The Americans picked a side as well as the Europeans. Just like they picked a side between Bobi Wine and Museveni. Because some of them picked a side on Museveni and the others picked a side on Guaido. Some picked a side on Guaido, some picked a side on Museveni. That's what happens, isn't it? So if at all you're saying that they picked a side on, that they want to take Venezuela's oil, right? And that's why they are supporting him, right? And then on the same side, Maduro is also using the oil and other resources to work with Museveni and keep him in power and subjugate and harass the people of Uganda. For me, I don't see the difference there between these two. Then, it's a bit confusing, but I hope you understand my point. So if Maduro is working in the interest of the people, he should have known that in Uganda there is someone called Bobi Wine, and he should have reached out. But he can't do that, because he will want to be getting more passports from Museveni. Now, should Bobi Wine have reached out to Juan Guaido? Should Bobi Wine have posted anything that he's talking with Juan Guaido and all this kind of thing? Because what has happened all of a sudden is that the revolution in Venezuela, it has wound down a bit, and it is not as popular as it was in the beginning, because Maduro regained control. The failed coup, the so-called Bay of Piglets, of which it is also said that Maduro is the one who might have orchestrated it, which was some sort of a move politically that helped him to regain control, because he was extremely unpopular, by the way. So that's what happened. Now, if Bobi Wine works with Guaido, does that make him a puppet? Because if you claim that Guaido is a puppet of the Americans as well as the British and all these other guys, so does that make Bobi Wine a puppet of these people as well? Definitely not. Now, what the problem is that we have some people who believe in socialist ideas, who are people that support Bobi Wine, but Bobi Wine has never come out to proclaim that he's a socialist or a capitalist. What Ugandans need is not a conversation about socialism or capitalism. No! What Ugandans need is the right to be able to live. We want our lives back. We want to be able to go back to Uganda, whereby I will not have fear for my life. I do not give a damn. I do not give any flying whatever about whether Uganda is a capitalistic or a socialist state. I want our country to be free. Because you can even live in a country where they have communism and it's not a free state. So many people live in Venezuela. So many people in China, we have even camps. It's a communist state. But there are camps for Muslims in China, my friend. Same applies to countries like Russia. So Bobi Wine has a right to work with anyone who stands with the plight of the Ugandan people, who is interested in helping the Ugandan people to get their lives back. For me, I wouldn't blame him to work with anyone, for as long as the opposing party does not reach out to the Ugandans. If they do not reach out, now for example, if Julius Malema, we all know his ideology, Malema's ideology is more of a socialist. Malema is a socialist, and Malema believes that for Africa to be successful, we should adopt socialist ideologies, right? But Malema is a very staunch supporter of Bobi Wine in Uganda. And he comes out clearly and says that we might differ with Bobi Wine in terms of ideology, but I support Bobi Wine. I support Bobi Wine. Malema makes that clearly. And that is really interesting for Malema. He says that, okay, ideologically we might disagree, but that doesn't mean that I won't stand with the Ugandan people. You get the point? That's why Bobi Wine managed to post Malema. Now, if Malema, who supports Bobi Wine, because Malema also supports Maduro, and then Guaido, who is so-called puppet of the West, is supporting Bobi Wine, so what does Malema have to do? Because Maduro is then supporting Museveni. Maduro is supporting Museveni. So it is up to Malema to convince Maduro to stop supporting Museveni and channel his energies elsewhere, of which Maduro and Museveni's and other African governments' connection, he cannot afford to lose that tie because of the economic sanctions that he has. He needs these countries to melt the gold and use Venezuelan gold, bring it to Uganda, sell it through Uganda, and then the Ugandan government gets that money and sends it to Maduro. He needs to acquire diplomatic passports from Uganda, such that in case things go haywire or south, he takes that route. So it's a catch-22. But then you have Bobi Wine seated on the other hand. For him, he's like, look here, guys. For me, if one Guaido is coming on my table and he's going to help out, what the Ugandan people need is to be free right now. The other thing is we shall look at it later. That's it. We shall look at it later. Now, speaking of puppetism or not perpetuity, but speaking of puppets, because I saw a lot of backlash on Twitter as well as Facebook. People saying, oh, Bobi Wine, he's rubbing shoulders with the US puppet. Africa and Africans should realize that the continent does not only stop on the boundaries of the African continent. It doesn't stop there. Unless, because I always sit down and I ask myself questions, and they are very controversial questions. It will be very hard for someone to describe who an African is today, in this day and age. If I came here and I asked you, who is an African? What answer would you give me? Some people would say, an African is someone who is black. Some people would say that an African is supposed to be black. Now, those are the diehards, like real diehards. Like, no, you're not African because you're not black. Then you go to countries like Papua New Guinea, where you have people who are not black, but they're not Africans. Then someone would say like, oh, an African is someone who comes from the African continent. Now, by saying that, you will create a very big rift between the person who believes that Africans are black and the person who says that anyone who comes from the continent is African, because there are some people who are not black, but they are Africans. They are white, but they are Africans. We even have brown people in Northern Africa, the Maghreb region and all these other people. They are white or they are brown, but who is an African? We haven't answered that question. We haven't come to terms with that question as a continent. And that is why we're still having the problems like people like Museveni. This is why we are having these problems. And that is why you see that you will see most people in the northern parts of Africa. It's a completely different world on how the West approaches the Maghreb region, that is the northern Africa, how they approach southern Africa, and how they approach sub-Saharan Africa. It shows how divided the entire continent is in terms of race, in terms of color. You get it? Because look here, I was speaking in a program today morning and I asked people a question that Obama was black, but how come he was so ruthless on the continent? Kind of ruthless on the continent. Because we would have expected Obama being black, maybe it would have, we would have felt a very big difference. But the only thing that I came to feeling a bit different with Obama's presidency is the fact that he was maybe Obama. You can't find that name anywhere else that, is not on the continent of Africa. And then maybe because Obama was black, that is how much I kind of related with the gentleman. But because Obama was made to feel American, I'm not saying that all blacks are accepted in the United States of America. I live in the diaspora. I know how these things are. The elements of tribalism, just as we have them in Africa, and the elements of racism, just as we have them in the West, they are still there and they will never leave. They are part of the society. But then there's that level whereby you are even able, because most people say, oh, Obama was a puppet, blah, 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 he couldn't do a thing. But even a person in his puppetism, they can always wake up and say, you know what? The consciousness hits them and they're like, man. But all of a sudden, I'm African, I'm black. I have to do something. Throughout Obama's presidency, I realized that I do not think that ever crossed his mind to say that, look here, man, I'm African. Oh, okay, you might say he visited Kenya, blah, blah, blah. Oh, yeah. But he felt more American than African. Now, how about maybe if Africa decided to also embrace, especially the black Africans, or the Africans of all races, how about everyone, we started embracing each other? and make a white African and make a brown African feel African first than feeling white first. Now, the elements that will say, no, we can never trust them, blah, 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 and all this kind of thing. Yes, that is right. But, because for me, that is my way of seeing things. That's my way of understanding society. And it's just a way of seeing stuff. Well, I understand the policies of Mugabe. I understand Amini's policies. I understand this kind of thing. But the truth of the matter is that, how do you solve it? In Uganda, Amin expelled Asians. It is a very, very popular policy even today. The expulsion of Indians in Uganda. We are proud of it. And I do understand that some of the people who benefited even still today, it's called the so-called economic war. Lots of people benefited. In 2000, Mugabe confiscated the white farms and handed them over to black people, right? But not every black person got a white farm. It is only Mugabe's circle that got the farms. It was a very popular policy. Yes, I understand that. And even Mugabe's speech after independence, he said that yes, after they toppled the UDI government under Ian Smith and so on, he said that, we can work with these people. But then, if Africa was to take that approach, the approach should be also reciprocated from people, from the particular categories of people we are talking about. The brown people, if you want to use that term, as well as the white people. I don't know if I make sense. But how can a society turn Obama? How can a nation turn Obama clearly against the continent? That is what fascinates me. So why can't we do the same to them? Like, play the same game. Why can't it happen? It is very hard. I've never in my world life found someone who proudly says that I'm African when they are white. These are people I'm talking about that come maybe from Namibia, they come from South Africa, and some of them maybe come from Zimbabwe. And some of them come from Egypt, or Tunisia, or Algeria, or Libya. They will say, I'm an Arab. But people who come from Kenya, Congo, they will say, no, I'm African. And when a white person meets a white person, they'll be like, where do you, they won't ask where do you come from, where do you live? Because they think that, this person is British or is American because he's white. If you're black, they're like, where do you come from? I come from Africa. Uganda, Idi Amin, blah, 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 blah. If they ask an Arab, what comes to mind is, this guy comes from the Middle East. Where do you come from? The person might not say, no, you don't come from Sudan. They may say, I come from Middle East. But when an American comes to Africa, who is black, we might not even ask where they come from at first, until you hear the accent. Oh, yeah, who are you? I'm an American. I'm British. Identity crisis. Identity crisis, isn't it? All right, guys. Now, I know I've went into a tangent trying to look at things, trying to talk about sensitive topics that I wouldn't have spoken about. But talking about those uncomfortable things will help us understand the problems of the continent. If we try to brush these conversations under the rugs and think that they will sort themselves out, we are not going to solve anything. It's going to lead to disaster, disaster, and more disasters. We should make sure that we embrace everyone, irrespective of where they come from or their religions or their tribes and things of that sort. So I think we should make sure that we get the industries out. We should make sure that the exports that we make to the West, we should stop exporting there. I mean, you cannot rely only on the black market. The exports that go to the West must make sure that we change that tide and they come within the continent. I was watching this thing called the African Free Continental Movement, something of that sort, that was signed of recent. And the people said, some of the experts in economics said that it is going to be very hard to achieve. It is going to be very hard to achieve. Because of the movement of goods and services in Africa, it is so hard. It is so hard. Some countries are opting out, some countries, that kind of thing. And what is funny is this, guys. There's a gentleman, I don't know who spoke about it. This so-called thing called APAC. Is it APAC? No, there's this movement of Jewish people in America that does Jewish lobbying on behalf of the Jewish people in US state, whatever. Like, I think it is APAC, the American something, Israel, whatever. Is it APAC? Yeah, that Jewish organization that does lobbying on behalf of the Israelites, blah, 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 blah. So, it's so funny that as Africans, we are so many in the diaspora, but we do not even have the lobbying power in these governments. We don't have lobbying power in these governments of the British and the Americans. For heaven's sake, we don't even have a voting bloc. A voting bloc to say that, okay, if you have the African diaspora vote, then you're good. How many Nigerians live in England? How many Ugandans live in the UK? I think the last time I checked, it must be around 700,000. How many South Africans live in the UK? How many Africans in the diaspora live in the America? Are you saying that we cannot change the voting tide in the United States of America? You look last year, this gentleman known as Trump, he went to India in order to get the Indian vote in America, because he understood that, okay, the Indian people are so many in the country, so if I go and meet Narendra Modi, I can get these Indians to vote for me. You can also look at the Cuban vote in America is also very interesting. Is it Cubans? Yeah. Is it? No, it's called the Latino vote. The Latinos. People who come from South America, those Latinos, the Latino vote. How come we do not have an African diaspora vote, if that's what it means? Now there is this one called the black vote that Joe Biden won overwhelmingly, because they make a distinct difference between the black vote and then people who have migrated from Africa and gone to these countries, the diaspora. These are completely different people. If you have lived in these countries, you know what I mean. So how come we are not able to lobby, number one? Secondly, we are not able to have a block vote in these countries. That is how we can change these nations. That is how we can effect policy. That is how we can change the way these people work with the continent. The fight for Africa as a continent, not only does it have to happen in Africa, but it also has to happen in the diaspora. That is, in the Americans as well as in the European countries. When the British when these guys thought about ending slave trade was not ended in Africa. No. Slave trade was ended in the Western countries. That is why you see, when these guys came, they went and sat in their countries to solve African problems. They never sit in African countries to solve African problems. It does not work that way. It doesn't happen. They always come to their countries because they know that is where everything originated from. That is why when they sat in 1886 to make the Berlin Conference, Otto von Bismarck and his friends, they sat in Berlin with no African chief to represent the Africans. And they said, oh, the Congolese chiefs will be given a piece of cloth per month in exchange to rights of Congo. A cloth per month. So H.M. Stanley comes and he makes Africans sign, he had a device that would shock people, who would shock the Africans. He had a device that had electricity in it. And then he started shocking people, and chiefs were signing, giving out the land rights, and they didn't know what they were signing, mind you. So everything had to be solved in these countries. So maybe it is time for us, as Africans, to start moving. For those of us who are in the diaspora, we do our role, and for the people back home, you also play your role. And by doing that, trust me, things will change for the better. We do not want to start fighting that, oh no, you beat people here. No. We need to be able to be on equal footing. We need to be able to be on equal footing. The same way you treat blacks in America, the same way, that's the same way we should be able to treat, the same way you treat Americans the same way you treat Ugandans in America, it is the same way Americans should be treated in Uganda. You get the point? That's how policy should change. You are not going to change. We are not going to change the policy or the attitude of the so-called superpowers only from Africa as a continent. Their attitude towards Africa should be changed from these countries themselves, as well as the countries where we come from. So, some people might disagree with my ideas. You see, that's what Bobi Wine always does. Like, he tries to bring these bridges. And that is what Museveni doesn't want. And that is what leaders who have overstayed in power do not want. Because they are comfortable. They always look at the Chinese as alternatives. They always look at Russians as alternatives. And I'm so fascinated, and so I'm really I'm really hard on my Pan-Africanist brothers and sisters because they don't look at so much on China. I've not seen so many Pan-Africanists in China and Russia. I remember I was speaking to a friend of mine, and he told me there's a time that the Russians gave Africans scholarships to go and study in Russia. But most of the Africans that went to study in Russia ended up dead. They were dying of unknown reasons. People were dying. The reason as to why we have not been... You see, the problem with Africa is this, that most of us are running so much to... We run so much to these countries that are more democratic, because most Africans are likely to run to countries that are more democratic than countries that are less democratic. We are likely to migrate to countries that are more democratic than countries that are less democratic. Isn't it? Like, you will find very few Africans in China or Russia, but you'll find more Africans in Europe and America. Because in these countries, they are able, whereas the countries have their challenges, they are able to express themselves, and they are able to they're able to Okay, I was reading the comments here, but you are able to express yourselves. I mean, I'm here, I'm speaking in the West. You know, I have that sort of level of being able to express myself. But there's so many things that I would love to share in my African continent. I would love to sit down and speak these words while I'm in Uganda. I can't, man. I will find myself 6 feet under. That's what happens. I'll find myself 6 feet under. And it is normal. We don't value life. Life can easily be thrown away for 100 quid. Get someone, die. That's it. We don't value life. You ever heard of the program known as, you ever heard of a gentleman known as Marcus Garvey? Marcus Garvey, he was a Jamaican, but of African origin. He was born, his parents were slaves, they worked in Jamaica, and he moved to England, then later moved to America. And then Garvey had an idea of repatriating Africans in America and bringing them back to Africa. Now that is where Pan-Africanism starts. Pan-Africanism did not start with Nkrumah and Sekou Touré and the modern Pan-Africanists. Post-colonial Pan-Africanism started way back with people like Marcus Garvey, or people like Dr. W.E. Du Bois, and so on and so forth. Because Du Bois and Gavi were had drifts on how to approach the issue of race in America. You get it? But Gavi's idea was that Africans all over the world should find means or should get ways on how to go back to or to come back to Africa. Now, some of the people in America supported the idea, not because they believed in the issue of Africans coming back to their motherland, but because actually some of the people in the Ku Klux Klans, the KKK, they wanted the Africans to leave. So they supported the idea, not because that they believe that these people had a right to choose whether to stay or to go. But for them, they no, you go. So Gavi was like, okay, if you guys we are not welcome here, then let us just go back to Africa, to our continent. So Gavi had prepared a ship and things of that sort. For those of you who know the story of Marcus Garvey, things happened with the ship. Africans bought shares, but it never materialized. There was a lot of sabotage. In the end, it didn't happen, but Garvey, I think, left, and then he came to Africa and died in Africa, somewhere in West Africa. But the idea of migration of Africans from the diaspora to come back to the continent is a very, very interesting idea. But the problem with that is that what are you coming back to? You're coming back to something like Uganda? You're coming back to something like Zimbabwe? You're coming back to something like Sudan or Ethiopia? What are you coming back to? There have been those ideas even up to today, where I've seen YouTube videos where people moved from America and then they come to Africa. They have come back to Africa. And I've seen the positive spins of stories about Africa and people ignoring the challenges that we face as a continent, as a people. I've seen positive spins of people who have come from the diaspora to resettle back in Africa, and saying that these are the things you never see they never show you in the news. And I always laugh, because it's just a matter of time. It might not be you, but it might be your children or grandchildren. So whenever I see that title, that this is the Africa you never see in the news, I'm always, okay, yeah, not so bad. But in Uganda, you do not need to post a video saying that, oh, this is the Uganda you never see in the news. Because that is what Bobi Wine has done, that he has managed to expose everything. That even if you show us your beautiful sceneries and everything, it does not make sense. All of a sudden, for as long as people are not free, for as long as people are still killed, for as long as people cannot express themselves, however much you have beautiful roads, however much you have beautiful hotels, however much anyone has free education, it all of a sudden does not matter. It does not matter at all. The Africa you never see does not matter at all, if at all people are not free. The Venezuela you never see does not matter, if at all Venezuelans are not free. Freedom is the ultimate objective that we all seek in this world. Yeah. The same freedom I can enjoy in the West, if it can be cloned in Uganda, I have no reason to come to the West. Some people get it wrong and they think that Africans move to Europe for economic reasons. No. Not only economic reasons. You get it? So, that is really interesting. There's a gentleman known as Professor Mahmoud Mamdan. He spoke about a couple of things on the issue of natives and settlers. He was trying to explain the issue of, he has done a lot of work in that area of native. Yeah, I think he has even written a book about native states and settler states and things of that sort. He was trying to explain the Israel-Palestinian conflict using examples of the Liberian question as well as the Sierra Leone experiment. Now, these are two experiments that had all different consequences. When you look at Liberia, because Liberia is one of the countries that had one of the worst civil wars in Africa, Liberian civil war. The other one can be Sierra Leone as well as Angola. Now, the origins of this civil war starts like this. The Americans were tired of the blacks, industrialization, and then slaves had to be repatriated back to Africa. And most of these slaves actually refused. They never wanted to be taken back to Africa. Some of them refused, but they were taken by force. So, this is what they did. They went to Sierra Leone, they went to Liberia and created a new state. Now, what you should understand is, whenever these people were being taken as slaves, they were gotten from different tribes, different societies, the different empires, the Songhai Empire, the Mandikas, and all this kind of thing. So they were coming from specific regions. It is just like taking you as a slave when you are from the Buganda kingdom, or you are from the Ankole, or you are from the Luos, or you are from the what do you call it? Or you're from the Dinka, or the Nuer, and then they get you and drop you in somewhere, North Africa, somewhere on the coast. when they are returning you, they drop you there. Because for them, they thought, seeing us all black, we are all the same. So they get people, and then they drop them back to Liberia. That is what the Americans did after the abolition. Then the British also copped they did also the same thing. They went to Sierra Leone, bought land, and resettled the slaves there. Now, these people, whenever their ancestors were leaving, they left the continent as natives. But when they were returned in these particular regions, they were returned as settlers. Because there's a difference between a native and a settler. Because by the time they were returned, and the regions they were returned in, these regions had the natives in these particular regions. Sierra Leone had its own native people, I think, forgotten. But in Liberia, they had, I think, it's the Kran tribe. Now, this is what happens. So you get a bunch of people who were in America, blacks. They had adopted American ideals, the dressing and everything American. So they are resettled in Liberia. And when they reached in Liberia, they reached as settlers. That is what Mahmoud Mamdan argues, that they reached as settlers who view fellow Africans as backward. And the Africans that were viewed as backward by the settlers were the natives of those particular regions. So what happened was these people subjugated them. They oppressed them. These are fellow Africans, blacks, coming from America and being resettled in Liberia, being resettled in Sierra Leone. They subjugated them. They oppressed them. They were denied voting rights. Their land was forcefully taken away. And this was done by fellow Africans, resettled by the Americans. There are elements, so there is a report in 1920s where these same people participated in slavery. They enslaved the native Africans because they saw themselves as more modernized and civilized than the native Africans. So the settlers who were gotten from this and brought back, this is what they did. They created a party known as the True Whigs. The party that has been, or the party that was in power for the longest on the continent of Africa, over 150 years. The True Whig Party ruled Liberia for 150, almost 150 years. No other party has ever gotten that record. And Africans, native Africans, were not allowed to vote. You get the point? So what that created was the so-called overthrow of Tolbert by Samuel Conan Doe, who was the first native Liberian to take power and to rule Liberia. And then after that, Doe became an autocrat, and in the end, Doe created, subsequently it created instabilities in the entire region. Now the same thing happened in Sierra Leone. That is why you see also Sierra Leone, it had its native tribes that the settlers saw as backward, and these ones were coming from Britain. And then in the end, it created problems. How do you solve that? When Africans look at having a migration from the West and to come back to our mother continent. Now the same thing happened in Israel, the Israel-Palestinian conflict, that the British resettled the Israelites in Palestine and brought the Israelites as settlers, because by that time the Palestinians were the natives. And it created the same situation. But I wouldn't like to go into it, but Mamdan asks a question that how come that later on the Liberian and Sierra Leonean experiment later worked out, because he was trying to argue the question of Palestine and Israel and to why it is not, it has failed to work out as we see how it happened in Liberia, because these are two almost similar circumstances that actually happened, just because maybe it's different continents. So it's interesting for me. It's interesting because when I look at that, it doesn't mean that it is it's the last, because I would have expected that Africa as a continent, our continent, Africa as a continent, we should be able to ask these questions. We should be able to ask these questions and to have these discussions, because I believe that Africa would benefit very much from the diaspora. If at all we could even give out free citizenship to Africans that are living in the diaspora to come back and live in these countries. But you can't do that when you have dictators in Africa. It cannot happen. I think in Ireland they had that same thing, whereby people who were living, Irish people who were living outside Ireland, they were given citizenship to come back in Ireland and reinvest. Why can't Africa attract African Americans or British Africans to come back to Africa and reinvest? It is because of leadership. It goes back to the same thing. It doesn't go back to capitalism or socialism. It rotates around the same thing. Leadership, leadership, leadership. People who do not want to leave power. That's where it rotates. If that is not solved, then there's nothing that we can do about it. Just imagine an African American or these British people, British American, Africans, and these other Africans in the diaspora coming back to a country like, for example, coming back to Uganda as we are, coming back to Southern Sudan, where the Dinkas are beating each other with the Nuers. Coming back to Uganda, where the faction of Museveni has stolen votes and Bobi Wine's faction, we are all fighting. Coming to Ethiopia, just imagine coming back to a home that is in disarray. Tell me, my brother, what would you do? You come home and you find the Ethiopians, the Tigranians. Abiy Ahmed is fighting with the Tigranians. You're home, man. You go to Chad, same thing. You go to Kenya, same thing. You go to Tanzania, Magufuli is, same thing. I do not care whatever you say about Magufuli. To me, is not my cup of tea. Is not my cup of tea. Magufuli, nah. Anyone who sides with Museveni, I'm very sorry. I cannot. So, ladies and gentlemen, you ask yourself, you're back home, and that is what you find in Uganda. That's what you find in the so-called Africa. And that's where you want to resettle. What happens? What happens? And then you get dragged into these sorts of politics that is tribal, politics that is racial, politics that is religious. You get out of the fire, so you get out of the frying pan and you fall into the fire. Because some of this may say, in America at least I had to deal with race. But in Africa, I have to deal with religion. I have to come to terms with race. I have to come to terms with tribe. Because they will ask, what's your tribe? Then you find these people, the so-called too brown to be Africa, like, the mixture of a white, maybe they had a white mother and a black father, Obama type. Those ones will really face a lot of problems that you are not black enough. What is wrong with this world? It is really interesting. What is wrong with the world? I think one thing is this, ladies and gentlemen. If Africa can be put in order, the entire world will come to order. That is what I see. That is what I believe. That is what I see. If we can get our things in order, the entire world will come to order. Bang. That's what will happen. So, in Uganda today, that's where things stand with the Mr. Bobi Wine. They are still fellow Africans are still kidnapping Africans. They are still killing us. They are still threatening us. And all these sorts of things. These things are all happening. But we also understand that all these things are also historical. And that is why at times, even if you see some of us fighting, especially on the fronts of people of the American front and the British front, it is because at least we see something. When we see representatives like Ilhan Omar, they're in the US House of Representatives, you at least think that, okay, yeah, maybe they can really have that sort of, you know, African thing that comes to mind in them. And because I would trust Ilhan Omar on Africa than I would trust Obama. Yes, because Ilhan Omar, if you look at her record, I mean, she has more of links. You know, Somalia has those really tight family bonds than Obama, because Obama was, you know, Ilhan Omar can do more for Africa than Obama can. So what if we had more representatives in the African, in the American Congress or in the American House of Representatives? What would happen? How about if we had more Africans in the British Parliament? Like people who are in the diaspora, they have African blood, but they have some sort of attachment back home. Not people who are entirely like Obama type. No. But people who have that sort, who can relate with the continent. People who can go back home in Somalia and say, okay, this is where I come from. I understand Somalia like the back of my hand. We don't have that those sorts of people. That's why we need to stand up and realize that if I'm Nigerian, I can get support from the Africans living in my particular constituency, and they can vote for me, and I will be able to bring their issues on the table. That is how we change discourse. That is how we create change within. But we shall not distance. If you distance yourselves from the Americans, if you distance yourselves from the British, if you distance yourself from the whites, you're not going to make any success, my friend. Keep your enemies close. Keep your friends close, but your enemies closer. I'm not saying in this case that the whites are our enemies. No. I have more black enemies than I have white. Yeah, that's it. And if someone says that this one is a US puppet, this one is a British puppet, a European puppet, what do you mean? Does that entail Africans living in the diaspora? Does that entail Africans that are being represented in the US House of Representatives? I mean, it's just a minute number of people, like 1 or 2, right? But anyway, what do I know? All right, let me see what people are saying. Let me read your comments, then I will wind up. Thanks for educating us and for acting international audience. No disrespect, mate, but Cameroon is still not free. Thanks for doing your part, though. Yes, Labette, thank you very much. I understand the situation in Cameroon between the Republic of Ambrosia and the current president. Is that Paul Biya? That is the French-speaking part of Cameroon, as well as the English-speaking part of Cameroon. I mean, these are all colonial problems whereby these people were just slicing the continent into pieces without having regards to the tribes and the complexities in terms of religion, in terms of tribes and all these kind of things. It's really interesting. You want to join your Ugandan brothers and sisters in their struggle but can't understand the language. That's why we use English now. That's true. I wish they used English more. Enter the Dragon, how are you? Hey, how are you, my Ugandan friends? Humbo from South Africa, nice to hear from you, Mkulu Humbo. Promote solidarity among all Africans. You are living in America, dressing and speaking like a European. Are you a settler if you return to Africa? I don't know what you meant there. Oh, yeah, yeah, okay. I understand the settle and natives thing. Ghanaian president says their citizenship was never taken away, so they can come home anytime. You are very right about it. Okay, Magufuli has done nothing wrong. Okay, Magufuli was okay. Look at me. I have more guns than you. Russia, Chinese, and all dictators around the world. It's okay. Legacy, okay. It's only Ghana welcoming them. That's why Steve Wonder is also moving to Ghana. I mean, the US, African Americans are non-discriminatory. I mean, the US, African Americans are non-discriminatory. Okay. If Magufuli is a good, why did he switch off the internet? Trump did better for Africa than Obama with his sanctions and travel ban. Kitu Sina, okay. Fair, okay. Charity begins at home. Ugandans have blocked us from joining our struggle, only speaking in your dialect. Oh, sorry about that. I also find that hard establishing solidarity with Ugandans because they speak only Luganda. All right, yeah. I have to patronize Mr. Mayanja's channel just to get context on the matters in Uganda. All right, guys. So basically, that is what is happening. And to give you a brief, some of the issues that are happening, Bobi Wine released a list of 428 people who have been abducted by the state and imprisoned. That is one thing that happened. Then we also understand that Ugandans in America have met with Representative Ilhan Omar, the representative from Minneapolis, to discuss the issues of Uganda. And the good thing is that Ilhan Omar comes from Somalia, and the issues of Somalia were presented to her and showed to her that Museveni is not in Somalia to create peace and things of that sort. So I believe she will push something of that sort. Senator Bob Mendes and the rest have also tried to help us out. Also, Senator Cory Booker also picked interest in the matter. He's a former Democratic presidential candidate. He's also an African American that picked the matter up in America. So the other issue was I've spoken about that, the Guaido issues, and you all understand that Bobi Wine also withdrew the petition from the court, and now he has taken the petition to the court of public opinion. So apparently, that's where we are in Uganda. I'll be uploading my short videos again, but I need your support, guys. It is because, like, you know, you have to do so many things here and there, work, this, that, and then you also do this work. So I need your support, guys. So if you can support us on this channel, if you can do anything for the channel, you can just inbox me and let me know. I would have a few things for use here and there so that we can see how we can work together. Then, so that I keep it more consistent here and there. Because I would love to do this full time. I would love to. The things that interest me a lot is history, me as a person. And I always tell people that if we do not understand the history of our countries, if we do not understand the history of the continent, we cannot understand the present situations that we are in. We cannot understand where we are today. A friend of mine has talked about the issue in Cameroon. The issue about Cameroon between the French and the British. You know, it's American. You know, it's a historical problem as well that has to be understood from that particular context on how these things happened. So that means that we always have to go back in the past to make solutions or find solutions for the future on what is happening in these particular African countries, especially countries like Uganda, countries like Rwanda, South Sudan, and things of that sort. So, yeah, I'm interested in doing all those sorts of things, but time, sitting down, reading, researching, and all those sorts of things, they really take a lot of time. It's more like a full-time job. So, yeah, that's what it is. So, guys, unless if you have anything else to say, I've seen the Kenyans have blocked Ugandan maize. I have no comment about that. If they block, let them block. It's Museveni who is losing anyway. So, yeah, that is me for now. And let us meet again Saturday, I think, sometime, and bringing you up to speed on the issues that are happening in the country. Have a blessed day, and bye-bye.